Again, my name is Kelsey Hancock. I'm the Client's Rights Advocate through the Office of Client's Rights Advocacy. I am with Disability Rights California, and our office does a lot of work when it comes to assisting clients with disabilities through many different areas of law. And specifically our office, the Office of Client's Rights Advocacy, I represent and assist clients and consumers of the Regional Center, specifically Alta Regional Center. So if you do have a concern and many different areas of law, like we spoke about last week, you are welcome to contact our office. I'm going to provide all of my contact information at the end of this PowerPoint. So first, special education advocacy. What is special education? These school districts have to provide students who qualify for special education what we call FAPE, which is free and appropriate public education, and it has to be in the least restrictive environment. These are going to be the two big areas in an IEP, an Individualized Education Program, that these will emphasize how a child receives services and supports in special education. So how do you know if your child is, or your client, if we have some trainees here on the call, how do you know that their education is not appropriate? If your child cannot do things that they've learned or that they could have done before, which shows regression, if your child is not making significant progress in their IEP goals and you feel that they're not learning anything new, or even if they are learning, you feel that the progress is very minimal, then that may be signs that your child's special education is not appropriate. And I do want to clarify what the least restrictive environment means. It means that all children should be educated as much as possible with students who do not have disabilities. This comes into play when we're talking about integration purposes, where your child may start out in special education classes, special day classes, and then they are in a general education population for certain classes or certain time periods. The goal really in an IEP is to get the child progressing enough that they are no longer needing those special education services and can move towards general education with minimal accommodations or modifications. So the first thing I do want to talk about when it comes to an overall IEP is how it is developed, how it is created, and how you can do extra assessments in order to see exactly where it is that your child is progressing in their goals. When it comes to assessments, they provide important information about what the child needs to learn. And before an assessment can be done, the school will send you an assessment plan. I just sent a little example one, the very top where it'll say an assessment plan, it'll give initial, annual, triennial goals. You'll have different plans depending on where it is your child is in at their IEP starting point. If you are doing an initial assessment, that is that you've contacted the school and said, hey, I think that my child needs some assistance. I think they need help in special education goals. I want you to evaluate my child. So this assessment plan, they're going to do an initial plan, do some reviews and evaluations of your child in a classroom setting. And with professionals in their field, they're going to review what it is your child needs and whether or not they are eligible for special education services. You'll also have different assessments depending, sometimes they'll be done annually to see if your child has met their goals for their yearly IEP, or they can do triennials, which is every 3 years. You will have, it's almost like one big giant assessment to see in these last 3 years, what are they meeting their goals consistently? And if not, do we have to look at different placement options? Do we need to look at additional support services, whatever is needed to get that child back on track? So I just wanted to add in the second page of it, normally they're going to look at different evaluation areas. I really wanted to give an example of what these look like. So when you're reading through an IEP and an assessment goal, you can see, oh, okay, I've seen this before, and really know what it is you need to look at. When you're looking at these evaluation areas, you're looking at academic achievement. This is normally going to be done by the teacher or any other professional who is in charge of academic instruction. They're going to look at what are their tests measuring when it comes to math? Can they write well? Are they able to include their speech and language goals? Any of those, when it comes to general knowledge, you'll also see that you'll have it on there listed. The plan will say who is going to do this assessment. You can see the title, you can see, okay, Ms. Smith is going to do the assessment, and you know Ms. Smith is the instructor. Great. You can also look through those, and if you see a name that you really don't recognize, then you're able to bring that up, say, hey, I don't know who this person is. Are they new to the school? Have they met my child? How often have they met my child? And it'll give you a better idea of whether or not this assessment was actually done correctly, or if you feel that it's been done correctly. So you can look through it, you can consent to these assessments, or you can not consent to a certain assessment. You can do it where they need your signature and your consent in order to do these assessments. If you are concerned that, hey, I kind of don't want a health assessment, or I don't want a social emotional assessment, I want to do that later, you can consent to part of it and then decline the rest of it. This happened a lot during the pandemic when there was certain social emotional assessments that really just couldn't be done because a child was not in class, they were in distance learning. So how can you assess a child in their social goals when they are not being very social at the moment? We saw it a lot where the parents consented to most of these if it could be done either over Zoom or in a safe environment, or they just declined it and said, you know what, I really don't feel comfortable having my child do an in-person assessment at the moment. We've seen that, and it's perfectly fine. They will find another way to do this assessment. So, assessment plans. The school district must do an assessment at least every 3 years, and that's going to be the major triennial assessment. You can request an assessment, however, at any time that you feel it's needed. We've seen this a lot right now just because of the pandemic. We've seen many of the children regress in their goals. You've seen it where a child who was getting along with their peers is no longer getting along with their peers, having tantrums at school, emotional breakdowns. And we're seeing a lot of parents that are going back saying, okay, now that class is back in session, you're back to in person, can we do an assessment of their social goals to see where they are at and how big they've regressed in this field, so we know if they need extra supports and services to get back up to par. So school district must provide you with an assessment plan within 15 days of receiving your request. This means that when you send a request, I always suggest you send it in writing, send it to the IEP team in an email or in a letter, and state that you are wishing for an assessment. You don't have to know the exact name of the assessment. They have different assessments and different methodical names for them. You don't need that information. You just have to clarify what it is that you want assessed. It could be, I think my child is behind when it comes to speech and language. They're not talking very well, or they've started talking and then they regressed and their words are few now. You can put in an assessment, just a simple email. I want my child to have an assessment for speech and language goals. That is it. The school knows what you mean, and they know what methodology needs to be put in place in order to make that assessment. And they have to respond to you within 15 days to say, okay, we are agreeing with this assessment plan. And or it's 15 days, they're either going to say, okay, we agree and we will provide an assessment, Or they're going to disagree and say, no, we think the child's okay. We're going to decline an assessment at this time. Later on in the PowerPoint, I'm going to discuss what happens when the school declines a request or just straight up says no, or they take their time and don't really give a response, which is what we call a constructive decline. And from the time, 15 days when they agree to an assessment, the school has 60 days to complete this assessment. That means that they have 60 days to get the professional, have the professional assess the child in whatever services and needs are needed. And then they have 60 days within that time period to do the assessment and plan and schedule an IEP to discuss the results. So once you receive the copy of it, the assessment report, we let the parents know to really let the school know, hey, you're requesting a copy of this report at least 1 week before the IEP meeting. Technically, there isn't a timeline on when a parent is supposed to receive some of these reports. There's not one actually written in the law, such as the timeline for 60 days that is written in the law. So when a school, they go by reasonable expectation. They hand you the assessment report literally 2 hours before the IEP meeting, and you do not have to go forward with that IEP. You can say, you know what, you provided this information way too late. I want time to review this. I want time to see if I have any concerns about this, and I want to be involved in this IEP meeting. Great. They have to reschedule the IEP. Normally, we're seeing when it comes to reasonable expectation is that the school will provide the assessment report about 2 to 3 days before the IEP. That is what we see as reasonable. You have a couple of days to review it and see if you have any concerns about it. So additionally, I do want to clarify that you have the right to request that the assessment report be translated into your primary language. While there's no authority to mandate that they do this, there is authority that it has to be done for an IEP in your primary language. They don't have that same language when it comes to the additional issues, assessment reports, any other report that would qualify with an IEP. So while there's no mandate, we have seen that most schools will be, with given enough time from that request, they are more likely to request and get that translated.
Thank you, Kelsey. As I said, I may break in occasionally to ask questions that may be important for us moving forward. And the question that came up is, what type of assessment should be included in the 3-year assignment?
So what kind of assessments?
Yeah.
Okay, so the type of assessments that should be included depends on what services, supports, and goals were made in all your other IEPs for your child. So if your child's IEPs were all centered around speech and language, occupational therapy, other goals, then they should have those assessments that correlate with those goals. So you're not necessarily going to have an assessment for speech and language if speech and language has never been a problem for your child. So it's not a set standard when it comes to what assessments need to be done, because again, this is very individualized for your child. If you want an idea of what assessments should be completed, you should look at, they have to give you all the information. You'll look at areas of concern that you've seen in the IEP, and you can look at what assessment should be completed based on those goals.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So we do want to clarify when it comes to how to read the assessment. We want parents and these advocates to know to not be afraid to ask questions about these results. Like I showed a little bit before, you'll go through that list and see, hey, I don't know the name of this examiner. Who is this person? You could find out, oh, they're a brand new nurse, school nurse that just started this year. Great. A lot of issues when it comes to nursing assessments are not necessarily as important depending on the child when it comes to overall educational and academic matters. So you can see, okay, then I'm okay with that. You'll go through and you find a speech and language pathologist. It's somebody that just started in the school and has met your child one time for 15 minutes. Are they really going to be the person that can really do an entire assessment on your child on what their goals are if they've met them one time for 15 minutes? So these are the kinds of questions that definitely ask about. If you don't recognize somebody on there, ask who they are, ask how long they've been there, ask how long their assessment was. We've seen ones where the assessment was done, we find out that the assessment was made on the second to last day of school. They weren't doing anything academic wise because it's the second to last day of school. They were having a pizza party. They pulled the child out. They say, oh, well, the child had emotional breakdown and maybe we need a behavioral plan. No, it's because you pulled out a 7-year-old boy from a pizza party. Like, I'd be mad too. I want pizza. So this is something that after speaking with mother and after seeing the day and her going, yeah, he was really upset about being pulled out of class for that pizza party. Of course he's going to be mad. So we can come back and go, he doesn't need a behavioral plan. You're the one that caused the behavior. So we were able to come back and he's step back on the school's decision to have a behavioral plan put in place for a child that did not show any behaviors. And when it says here, if you disagree with this assessment, you feel that there are problems, then you have the right to ask for what we call an independent assessment. It's a second opinion. You see this assessment, you decided, you know what, this really doesn't sound like my child. And when you're speaking with parents and when you're speaking with advocates, you really want to know that the person who knows this child best is the parent. This parent's going to know whether or not this child has a history of behaviors. This parent is going to know what issues are they showing regression patterns with. They're going to know, hey, my child was doing great and all of a sudden they're back to bedwetting. What happened? These are things that really clarifying with the parent that if they are looking at an assessment and you feel that something just doesn't feel right, ask for that independent assessment. Because we'll never go back and say, no, you really shouldn't. I'm always of the mindset that a parent knows their child best. And I do double check how to request an independent assessment. You just contact the school in the same way you requested that previous assessment and say, I don't agree with this. I want an independent assessment. And then the school has to pay for that independent assessment. If the school declines an independent assessment, we'll get to the other areas of what happens when the school says no to your requests. So what is an individualized education plan, an IEP? It's going to be a plan that provides special education to a student with a disability. Every child has their own special needs. So an IEP must be specially designed for the individual child. And we're looking at how often how often should the team meet? These IEPs are typically once a year, but you can request an IEP at any time. If you feel that there's something that has changed in your child's demeanor, in their progress, in their goals, or in their placement options, you have the right to request an IEP, and an IEP has to be scheduled within 30 days of your request. And when we're looking at who is required to attend this IEP, we're looking at the parent and, if appropriate, the students. We really looked at more options when it comes to why I'm seeing more IEPs that are not including the actual student. A lot of the IEPs, just because they're scheduled on Zoom, virtual learning, it seems that they're happening at just different times now when the student is actually in class. However, if that is the only available time, a child can leave class in order to attend the IEP meeting. Or because we're not necessarily saying that the child should be there the entire time, but they can definitely be there for a certain amount of time to if they want to say something to their IEP team, or if they want to emphasize what goals and progress and other objectives they want to meet. You can absolutely do that and make it a short period of time, 15 minutes, and then they can go back to class and not miss too much education. The other people that we should be having attend an IEP meeting is all their teachers, the general education teacher, the special education teacher. We're looking also at a school district representative. That's normally, it could be the school principal or somebody from the actual school district. When it comes to IEPs that is reviewing assessments, the person knowledgeable about that assessment should be included in the IEP meeting so that they can discuss how they did their assessment, what they viewed, and why they made the decision that they made. If you are concerned about a certain assessment, but not so concerned about other assessments, you agree with them, you can give permission to have them not attend if it's conflicting with their schedule. However, if you are having a concern about an assessment, I highly suggest having that person there. And it's almost like a little bit of a lawyer game. You can interrogate them. Say, okay, how long did you meet with my child? How did you do this? What kind of assessment did you use? What time of day did you use this? If you know your child and you know that they are bright, bushy-tailed in the morning, and they're the ones waking you up at 6 a.m. and going, hey, mom, I'm hungry. Can you feed me some food now? And it's 6 a.m. We all know that kid. But you know that at 3 p.m. or at 2 p.m., they're starting to go downhill. They're not, he's getting back. They can't respond as quickly. They're just tired and annoyed and not wanting to do anything. It's probably not going to be an accurate assessment if it's going to be done at 3 p.m. when you know your child is not in it. So you can say, I think an earlier assessment is going to be a better, accurate representation of my child.
Sorry to break in again, Kelsey, but another question that I think may be relevant for people to be able to move forward. And the question is, can the school refuse an IEP for a student who has social self-regulation sensory issues, but is still testing well academically? And this may be a time to explain IEPs 504s.
Oh, of course. That's what I was thinking with that as well. So yes, a school can refuse an IEP. Again, you can always deny that option. However, there are these other avenues you can look at. If a child is having some social, behavioral, or sensory concerns, but they're still doing okay academically, they can also go on what they call a 504 plan. And it doesn't have some of the same regulations and federal law as an IEP. However, it is there to help provide related services for a child that they don't need specialized academic instruction, but maybe they need a behavioral plan, or maybe they need a social assessment, they need some assistance on a one-on-one aid. Whatever it is, that can be done under a 504 plan. So when you are assessing the child in the beginning, the school is going to assess them under a IEP and a 504 plan to determine which one is going to work better for this child.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And if we want to look at the different parts of an IEP, it's going to be these are the main ones that I'm seeing that I really hone in on. They're going to be present levels of performance. Where is your child currently? Learning goals, accommodations that has been requested in order to keep them on their services, behavioral plans, placement options, services, and transition services. The transition services are going to be for students who are a little older, these are the ones that are about to graduate school, or up to 22 years old if they're on a certificate track. So present levels of performance, it's going to be, does the IEP describe the child's current ability and performance? It's going to say what's their strengths, their weaknesses, what progress have they made since the last IEP. And these definitely look at that because, again, the parent is going to be the best advocate on what it is that you know about your child and their strengths and weaknesses. So definitely speak up at the IEP if you are feeling that it's not describing your child's level of performance. You're reading it and it's saying that, hey, your child's doing great. They're writing legibly and you see that these motor skills are doing great. However, at home, you're seeing that the child's having fine motor skill issues with their hands, not being able to hold a pencil correctly, and their writing is atrocious. You cannot read it. It's not legible. You're looking at this and going, that's not accurate. It's not. And there's going to be different levels of legibility between what a teacher sees for a third grader and what a parent sees. Because, and at the end of the day, writing, maybe your child will be a doctor. They can't write either. So goals and objectives. These are going to be the big ones that they're hitting when it comes to this IEP. The goals can cover different areas of your child's education. It's going to cover academic, their social emotional goals, behavioral, speech, motor development, and the goals should be specific, measurable, and appropriate. And what I mean by specific, measurable, and appropriate is that you have to be able to measure this goal. A bad goal is child will learn how to read. Okay, read what? Read how much? A good goal would be child can read a sentence comprised of 5 4-letter words with 90% accuracy 8 out of 10 times. Now, this is something that when they are testing the child, they can see. They can see, okay, is the child doing this with 90% accuracy? Is the child able to do this 8 out of 10 times? So just is a goal, will child learn how to read? Okay, are they reading a picture book with a couple of pages, or are they reading Harry Potter? Which one is it? These accommodations is going to be what it is that the school needs to do extra for this child in order for them to reach those goals and objectives. It's going to be, do they get extra time for tests while in class? Are they going to have reduced or modified work? Are they going to have preferred seating in the classroom? We've seen this where we have children that have concerns with ADD, ADHD, and maybe having their desk right in front of the teacher's desk helps them stay focused. And additionally, breaks. If they are a child that just cannot sit still in that classroom for that long, allow them to take 10-minute breaks, a certain amount of 10-minute breaks throughout the day. And these accommodations can be anything. They should be written out in the IEP that this accommodation is occurring. And if we're looking at related services, that's going to be transportation is a big one. It wasn't as big last year during distance learning. However, is this child going to be driven on the bus to school and back home? If they have certain therapies and other related services in another school location, are they going to be driven from that school location to the other one and then driven back to school? We're going to look at speech therapy as a big one that we see with many young children. Looking at physical or occupational therapy, psychological services, counseling, these school health services. This happens when you have children who are medically fragile or have other physical disabilities that require additional assistance, whether that is going to the bathroom, whether that is being transferred from one classroom to another, whatever it is, having somebody there that can assist. Additionally, parent services. We started seeing more of this come up during distance learning. that parents got a lot more involved in day-to-day educational and social goals than they had previously originally. So they started adding more parent services in there. Does the parent need some assistance in homework? Does the parent need more assistance here? Does the parent need assistance when it comes to translation services? That type of thing. And I've spoken about this several times when it comes to behavioral plans, that sometimes they just have behaviors related to their disability that affect their ability to learn. This could be their inability to show emotion in a correct way. It could be that they act out and become violent. These are concerns that should be put into its own behavioral plan, and those should address these behaviors. They need to address what it is they're going to do to target these behaviors and what positive ways to prevent or address the behavior. This comes up a lot when we are seeing I really get more involved in the behavioral plans when we have big kids. We have teenagers. We have that teenage boy who is on the autism spectrum, but he's like 6'5". If he is going to have an emotional breakdown, how are we going to keep him safe and keep others around safe? And this is when I get a lot of parents that are contacting me when it comes to restraint policies in schools. I really encourage anyone that is seeing the behavioral plan and seeing restraint policies to really review the restraint policies of their school. And also, please contact our office and we can talk with it through as well, because there are certain areas that a restraint policy is just not necessary. And this comes in a lot when we are seeing more police force and police interventions in schools. And it's a scary thing when you have a child with a disability who might not understand a police officer telling them to stop and put their hands up. When we're looking at placements, we're looking at least restrictive or more restrictive policies. Least restrictive is going to be the general education, then it's going to go to resource specialized programs, special day classes, and non-public school options. We're going from placements of good to bad from left to right. Not necessarily bad, but just the options that we are not looking towards. That's going to be the most extreme cases. And just because a student is in special education does not mean that they have to be in a specialized classroom or a school. So sometimes we get we get the parents and we get the students that their schools told them, oh, well, because they have an IEP, they can't really be here and they need more assistance. And I'm seeing a very generalized IEP that would not require super specialized treatment.
Kelsey, I just want to second. Regarding the issue of least restrictive, I'm seeing, and it's something that's becoming more common, where least restrictive is being defined not based on the environment that is the most normalized and most opportunities, but least restrictive is being defined as the place where the child requires the least amount of support. So I have more commonly started to see things where they're justifying a special day class or pull-out class because they're saying that is the least restrictive because the child can be in that class without additional supports. I'm just curious, have you seen that? And do you believe that that's an appropriate definition?
I have seen that, and I do not believe that it's appropriate definition. I believe that the goal is to have a child transition out of special day classes and into general education. And what I've seen when it comes to other these services is that you go to specialized day class and then they start doing partial integration where you're in the class for certain subjects, but then other subjects you're doing okay with, you move on to general education with maybe an aid or maybe some accommodations or modifications. And I've seen some schools try to do the excuse of, oh, well, here they won't need the aid or they won't need this. No, you just want to save money and don't want to hire an aide. These newsflash, you're going to hire an aide. If you are having concerns and you're seeing school districts do that, please give an advocate a call, and that's something we can discuss with. And also, that's something that you can also have an advocate attend an IEP meeting to remind them of the definition, because sometimes they like to hear it from a lawyer.
Thank you so much, because again, this has kind of been an Orwellian shift where the words have been reversed, the definition of that term have been reversed. And I find it to be a very disturbing, kind of development that's happening.
Exactly. And I'm also seeing a question here to expand on the previous question. If an academic issues with turning in class assignments and failing tests in class, but the achievement testing shows no concerns, would that still mean a 504 plan? Can they still fail the child? They can still technically fail a child. However, when you're looking at whether academic testing is showing, okay, maybe no concerns, but they're just not turning in class assignments or failing testing in class, it could be more of it could be more of a class anxiety issue. I've seen that sometimes. You have testing anxiety. It could be a 504 plan. However, if you feel that the issue is more intensive than that, if you feel that the achievement testing assessment was not necessarily appropriate and not actually something that is given in the real world, then you can absolutely request that independent assessment to see if an IEP would be more appropriate. Because the concern sometimes we see here is some of these assessments and evaluations are given under placements and circumstances that a child would normally not see in their actual classroom. So you have to make it as close to reality as possible. And that is looking at their testing in the actual classroom, not individually while they're on a computer at home.
Thank you so much. Let's go ahead and progress. And then we do have another question that we'll get to a little bit later.
Okay. So we want to get to how to have an effective IEP advocacy. And we're going to look at before the meeting, during the meeting, and right after. So before the meeting, ask for those assessments, ask for the IEP meetings in writing. He's asked to receive any of those reports at least 1 week in advance so that you have that time to review it. Additionally, getting those assessments in advance, if you are bringing a friend or a relative with you, or you're bringing an advocate, it gives the advocate time to review that assessment as well. Because I've seen it where parents will give me a call and ask if I can attend an IEP meeting, and then I'm not getting any of the documents until the day before. It's going to be incredibly difficult for me to review all of that. If I have any questions, ask the parent, review it with the parent before a meeting. So those are the times when we would ask for the meeting to be postponed. You would also need to notify the school district if you need an interpreter or translator. It said not notifying it. The whole issue of notifying the school is to give them enough time to find this interpreter or translator. So the school has to provide one. There is not an option. They have to provide it if you ask. You just want to give them enough time to actually find a person. When it comes to some interpreters, it's going to be very easy to find somebody that's Spanish speaking. We live in California. A lot of people speak Spanish. It's not that uncommon. It's going to be more difficult once you're getting into those more unique languages or finding somebody when it comes to American Sign Language. So definitely give the school enough options to find a person for you. And if you're planning to bring a tape recorder or an attorney, you have to let them know at least 24 hours ahead of time. I've had it so many times when a parent has not told the school district I was coming, and they show up and they don't like an attorney there unless their attorney, the school district's attorney, can be there. So definitely let them know ahead of time. tape recorder. Parent, you have the right to tape record, audio record the meeting. Even without if the school denies it, school can't deny it. You have the right to do that. You just have to give them warning ahead of time that you are going to. Additionally, if the school wants to audio record or video record, you have the option to decline that. If you say, I don't feel comfortable with that, I do not want a recording, then the school has to turn it off. Because when it comes to recording, it is the parent's role and the parent's decision. So can I get copies of a written assessment before the IEP meeting? Absolutely. They're required by federal and state law to provide copies at no cost to you. You should have a request in writing so that if they do not provide it, you have that little bit of extra saying, hey, look, I requested it and they did not provide it. Then you can go back and do a complaint later on. So during the IEP, definitely writing down your ideas, your opinions, observations of the child ahead of time. I always suggest parents to have a list, write down all the concerns while you're reviewing the assessment so that you don't miss anything. Because when you're in that moment, it's very easy to forget something. Definitely make list of goals that you want to see for your child's education. Do they want integrated placement? Do you want them to start transitioning them to general education? Do you want, hey, I'm noticing that maybe they need some more time when it comes to breaks, that they need some additional time for testing. This is your time to request all of those. Additionally, if it's possible, gather and bring support for your position. If the school is saying, if this child doesn't have concerns with speech and language, great, you just did an assessment through the regional center or through your doctor, and you have another professional that's saying that they do have concerns with speech and language. Provide that. So during the meeting, definitely speak up. I absolutely understand that it can be a concern for parents that they don't want to rock the boat because they have to deal with this school and this child's education for a long time. You don't want to be the parent that's they're not going to agree with or not going to entertain any ideas because they don't like you. Then again, but you also do not want to be a pushover. I've seen some parents where they go back and forth. I've seen ones where I've had to go in to really calm down a parent and there's a screaming match with everybody. If you feel that your emotions are going to be so overrun in a meeting like this, I highly suggest you do ask an advocate. You can ask your regional center service coordinator or a family member or friend to be there to be that calming force to help you. Because I promise you that the school is not going to listen to a word you say when you're screaming it. Unfortunately, that's something that we've had to talk with many families about because I can understand the emotions that come in this. And it's our job over here to make sure that the emotional factor really is calming down so that we can actually get those goals that you need for your child. And Steve, did you want to add a question?
Just if you can go back to that previous slide. One of the things, and this goes back to something that you had regarding who's required to attend the IEP. And one of your first one on the list was the student, if appropriate.
Yes.
And regarding this issue of advocacy within the IEP, I just want to point out that one of the things that we know from research is that the adult outcomes for students who attend IEPs are significantly better than students who do not, because you're obviously learning to discuss your disability, the types of supports that you need. And one of the things that I just really encourage families to do is to find ways, as you said earlier, of including your son or daughter at some point in the IEP, if not the entire IEP. And one of the ways that I oftentimes advocate for families to do this is to help the student develop a PowerPoint that they can talk about the things that are important to them. But again, my suggestion is to let the school team know in advance that you're going to do that, because they oftentimes schedule that IEP very, very tightly. And if you're not expecting that. So I just wanted to bring that up.
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. Yes. Especially if your child does want to be there, then really talk with them through about what it is they want. Even if they don't do a PowerPoint, they can maybe write down what their wishes and goals are, and then they can read them out loud to the team. So any way that is most comfortable for your child. So next, finally, is reading that IEP after the fact. At the end of the IEP, make sure you get a copy of the actual IEP. Right now, just because they are virtual, that a lot of the times you're not going to get a copy on that day. They're going to clean them up, get the notes all nice and pretty, and then they're going to send you over a draft. Make sure to really read through that. And what I also suggest is during the IEP meeting, just because it is virtually, you have a little bit of that option. Having a notepad next to you to really talk about the big areas that there were discussions about. And make sure that this IEP does include all of them. Make sure that all the important information is in there. Make sure nothing was sent out. I recently had an IEP amendment where we had 2-3 areas of big topic conversations that we needed to go through. And I find out that only 2 of them were listed in the IEP. A whole other discussion that we had 30 minutes of this discussion was never even mentioned in that IEP. And I made sure to send it back and go, yeah, you need to accurately report this. So again, with this IEP, you do not need to sign it right away. I do not suggest you sign it right away. Take it home, look at it, review it, make sure everything's okay. If you agree with what it says, then you can sign it. If you do not agree or you disagree with some parts, you can check it off. You can look through it and say, you know what, that's not really what I said, that's not what I meant, or something wasn't added, or there was some miscommunication in there. You can absolutely use a little marker or use whatever you need to cross things out, look at it, update notes, say, hey, we discussed this, but I don't see it accurately reported here. And you can send them back for corrections. I suggest you do that over email so that you have accurate record of these requests, and the school can decide that they're going to update with your notes, or they're going to maybe deny some part of it. Whatever it is, you can look at it. You can agree to some parts of it, saying, you know what, I agree with the placement, I agree with this. However, I want to come back to the drawing table and talk about occupational therapy. So you can go in it and you can sign it and put a little asterisk next to it and say, I agree to this, this, and this. I do not agree to the speech and language goals. I am requesting another IEP meeting to further discuss this. So if you do not sign an entire IEP, the last signed IEP will remain in effect until those issues are resolved. So let's get to talking about COVID, our favorite topic, obviously. Practical tips to setting up a successful educational environment during the coronavirus outbreak. We really want to emphasize with everyone to really keep in close contact with the IEP team. Keep that open line of communication open, especially if there's going to be more concerns with less educational instruction, possible times when there's going to be these outbreaks, or you get that call or you get that letter that there has been a possible outbreak and your child sent home for a few days. Really, work on it with that IEP team, determine, okay, during these times, what is my child going to do? Are they going to get packets? Are they going to do online learning? What are going to be the options? And regularly check in with the teachers to discuss progress, how things are going. The teacher's normally the accurate representation of what is happening in that classroom. And if you're seeing, and that teacher is seeing a decline in some areas of support, then come back to the drawing board, ask for a new IEP team meeting, and get those issues resolved. And again, with IEP goals, prioritize those goals. We're going to understand that maybe when it comes to staffing concerns, or maybe there are issues with safety wise, we have to prioritize what goals your child needs this year and at this time period. Try to relate some of those goals to activities at home. And this really came in about when it was distance learning. So distance learning is not happening at the moment, but we feel that there's going to be some school districts that may have to revert back to that if the numbers do not go down. And definitely keep in touch with those teachers. So what if the school only provides limited special education services, just based on what, if they're going to say it's staffing, if they're going to say it's COVID, whatever the reason, if you agree with the services being offered by the school district during school closures, it is important to protect your child's existing IEP for when that school reopens. Sometimes the schools are going to come back and ask you to do an updated, amended IEP. I would suggest you keep that existing IEP and not go for amendments. If you are going to do an amendment, then have an accurate time frame on this IEP is only going to be in existence from this day to this day, and that's it. You also have the right to provide limited consent to a temporary plan. So you can agree to implement the plan offered by the school district for a small amount of time, and you can do that limited consent without waiving your child's IEP rights to compensatory services. Now, what if your school is closed and refuses to provide special education services? If your school is not providing special education services during school closures, your child may be entitled to compensatory services. And that's really for makeup time for missed school services. These, I would suggest when it comes to parents, is keeping a journal of special education or a 504 plan services that your child has missed as a result of school closures. Really accurately, on so-and-so dates, they missed speech and language therapy. On this date, they missed occupational therapy. On this date, they missed these academic instruction. And request an IEP meeting to discuss compensatory services. This is saying, due to these losses, I want extra time. Compensatory services are made on an individualized basis, and you may not necessarily get all of the hours lost, but you can at least get some of them. And part of compensatory services is really that if they say no, you also have that accurate record when it comes to email exchanges to go and file due process.
Kelsey, I think it's important that you define what compensatory services are. And if you could give an example or two, I think that would be helpful.
Of course. So compensatory services are services that are made up time. It's made up services that you lost. So your child was out of school for a week due to school services. In a week, you know, based on the IEP, that your child should have had 2 classes for speech and language. You know that your child had 2 counseling sessions. You know, in that time period, your child was supposed to have specialized academic instruction for 2 hours. And look up all of that time. And when you're requesting extra time, saying, okay, since my child did not get speech and language this month or this last week, then I'm requesting 3 sessions this week and 3 sessions the next week to make up for that time. So compensatory services can be anything that is in the IEP. And in an IEP, they're going to be very clear about the amount of times that your child is going to be doing these services on a weekly basis. So you'll have an accurate representation of what it is that he actually missed.
I know of at least one family, because my concern if you were to do it to where you say, well, we're going to have 3 sessions next month, that would be overwhelming a child. And I know of at least one family that did compensatory services over the summer so that it was stretched out, and it also provided that kind of fill for when they were not receiving, any kind of support.
And I've seen that as well, that if there was a significant amount of time that they need to do compensatory services, that they've extended them out to summer school courses, or they've done private tutoring, where these obviously schools are not going to want to pay for private tutoring. You have to fight them for that. But it could be that, hey, they've missed so much time. Now you have to pay for a private tutor that they go to an hour after school every day, or they go on a Saturday. Whatever plan you come up with, it's going to be individualized for that child.
Thank you. I think that was very helpful.
Of course, no problem. And big thing I want to talk about is independent study. Right now, none of the school districts are doing distance learning anymore. As of right now, obviously things are changing. We're having a lot of counties that their numbers are going drastically up. So who knows if schools are going to be able to remain open if they have too many exposures. So independent study, it's a new, updated law that they have brought in for the 2021-2022 school year. So does the school district have to offer independent study? And the answer is yes. The changes that have happened with this school year is that previously independent study was made for general education students. It was made for the students that were student athletes, that were going off to the Olympics, that were doing big and better things, that were traveling. So the best option was going to be they remain in school, but they do everything virtual, online learning. So it was kind of like a homeschool setting, except through the actual public school district. Now, they changed this because they had so many students that their parents did not feel comfortable sending them back to in-person instruction. And this is the big thing we're seeing right now with many parents. So for the school year, these school districts said they have to offer independent studies to any student who needs to engage in remote learning, including students whose health would be at risk returning to school in person. They have to accommodate the continued need for distance learning. And there was that change in the law. It's called AB 130. You can look that up, and it's also a full explanation of it is on the Disability Rights California website that you can find. We can have any student remaining on distance learning will need to be enrolled in independent studies. However, charter schools are not required to offer this independent study. So we're seeing that issue come up as well. Some charter schools are providing their own version of distance learning. So it's going to really depend on your individual school. We're seeing some schools where they are claiming overall that, well, if your child has an IEP, they do not qualify for independent study. That is not correct. Sometimes we're having to go back and forth with the school. It's like, okay, we're going to have an assistant from the school or myself as an attorney. Which one is going to know more about this law? Children with disabilities, if part of the school district is that they cannot participate in independent study unless it's written in their IEP. And however, you have to have an IEP meeting to request independent studies so that the school can review your child's needs and determine if independent study would be appropriate to offer a FAPE. Because if your child is already shown that they cannot do remote learning and they are not progressing in their goals, if it is just not working out, they're likely not going to agree to independent study. However, if you have a school district or your school is telling you, well, if they have an IEP, they automatically do not qualify, that is absolutely not true. That is not correct. They still have to provide an IEP meeting to determine if that would be an appropriate placement. So do not let the school districts overall just tell you a no and give you absolutely no option for a meeting. If that happens, please contact Disability Rights California or Office of Clients' Rights Advocacy, and we can assist you in getting that IEP meeting. Second option when it comes to remote learning is home hospital instruction. Originally, home hospital instruction was created for children who had temporary medical fragile conditions. So that was for children whose who were going through cancer treatments at the time, or had a significant injury that they really just could not go to school. They would have a temporary service where the instructor would either come to their house or do virtual learning, and you would have a one-on-one instructor for a period of time. Again, this is for a time limit. So we're seeing a lot of parents and students who are doing home hospital instruction that are saying, you know, due to my child's medically fragile concerns, their diagnoses, you have a doctor's note that is saying this child is medically fragile due to these conditions, and I do not suggest that they go back to in-person instruction. And great, the school will review that medical professional's note and determine their need for home hospital instruction. I've seen them where they have stated that this child will remain in home hospital instruction until there is a vaccine made available for that age group. So we're seeing it for parents that are already planning on having their child vaccinated for COVID-19, and they're saying they're too young for it right now. Until a vaccine is made available, I do not feel comfortable with them going in-person instruction. So home hospital, I just want to clarify that it is a minimum of 5 hours a week. That if a school is saying that it's a maximum of 5 hours a week, they're going to try and play that. It's going to depend on an IEP meeting to determine if they require more hours. So finally, if you disagree with an IEP, you can request another IEP to discuss outstanding issues. Or if the school district does not follow an IEP, or if you have a disagreement with the district, you can file a complaint. So if you disagree with services offered by the district during the COVID-19 crisis, it's the same thing. You have the right to file a complaint or request a due process hearing if you do not agree with a school district decision regarding educational supports for your child. And a compliance complaint is if your child's IEP is not being implemented, as submitted. Okay, if your child's IEP is not being implemented as discussed in the actual IEP notes, then you would submit a compliance complaint. Now, this must be written and accompanied by your actual child's IEP. So you would find the form, or you can write a letter yourself, and there's instructions on how to file a compliance complaint on the CDE website, the California Department of Education website. It's really simple. You write down what it is that the school did not do, and that caused a violation of that child's IEP. It could be that the child's IEP says that they are to receive 2 hours of academic instruction a day, and then you find out later that they've only been getting 1 hour a day for all of this time. You would file a compliance complaint because it is something that the school did not do according to the IEP. And the CDE has 60 calendar days from the date that they received the complaint in order to investigate and resolve the case. And resolve could mean that they either agree with your version, and part of the compliance complaint is going to be you're asking for resolutions for this, this, and that. If it is that you were not getting services, your child was not getting services, then you're asking for compensatory services. Then the school district can come back and go, or not, the Department of Education can come back and go, yes, you are correct. You are entitled to this many hours of compensatory services. Or they can come back and say, actually, we don't agree with this. We're going to decline and deny your request and your complaint. We're going to find that the school was not in violation. It could go either way. A due process hearing is different than a compliance complaint. A compliance complaint is there was something written in an IEP that the school did not follow. And a due process hearing is you want something in an IEP and the school is denying it. So if you do not agree regarding eligibility for IEPs, appropriate programs, necessary services for your child, or related services, then you would request a due process hearing with the administrative hearings court, the Office of Administrative Hearings. you would indicate in the IEP that you're going to request a hearing. You can go on the website for the Office of Administrative Hearings, and you can file for a hearing on that date. Part of the documents is that you can also file for mediation. I highly suggest that if the school is agreeing to it as well, and you can discuss mediation options prior to a hearing. You can send a copy of the hearing request to the school district. If you are having concerns and you just need maybe some assistance or you have some questions about due process hearings, you are welcome to contact our office, welcome to contact any other advocate. And even if I cannot represent a child directly for a hearing, I can at least provide you a step-by-step process on how you can move forward with it and how you can be successful at a hearing. So we're looking at helpful resources. You can go to disabilityrightsca.org. We have many publications on that website on how to file anything when it comes to special education. We have I can include this as well. We have a great publication manual on our website. It's called the SIR manual, the Special Rights and Responsibilities. So it's going to detail everything from the IEP process to how to request complaints, denials, hearings, anything when it comes to special education rights and responsibilities. You're going to look at the Department of Education. That's where you're going to find the most accurate and up-to-date information on COVID restrictions and what issues have come up. I don't think I clarified this, however, but in the very beginning of COVID, there were timeline extensions for assessment plans, IEP details, all of those. None of those extensions are in effect now. They're all gone. So the timelines, the original timelines for getting assessments completed and getting IEPs completed are back to where they were originally. It's 60 days for an assessment, 30 days for an IEP. Additionally, you can look at the U.S. Department of Education Office of Civil Rights. This is going to come in handy when you feel that there has been discriminatory practices within your school against your child. So the Department of Education is that you don't agree with special education issue when it comes to services. Office of Civil Rights is going to be that you feel there was a discrimination based on your child's disability. And here is my information I have for my office, my email address, along with my phone number for the office, along with the Assistant Clients' Rights Advocate, Clara Torres. We have the office phone number and her email address as well. If we have these individuals on the call that are either bilingual, speak Spanish, or know somebody that is primarily Spanish speaking, Clara Torres is bilingual. So she can assist in that matter, whether it is speaking to somebody in Spanish or translating for me. And I'll also put this information on the chat as well. So I guess if anyone has any questions.
We do have a couple of quick questions. And again, I want to thank you so much, Kelsey, for this presentation. Special education is incredibly complex and our system is difficult to navigate. So both your information as well as your ability for people to contact you is going to be significant. I want to actually follow up with what I just said, because one of the questions is, how do we get help if we're not already established at Alta Regional Clients? My son got a diagnosis of autism at the Minor State when he was 4 and has had school assessments and IEPs in place since kindergarten, but we have never worked with Alta.
So if you want to get established as an Alta Regional client, all you have to do is give them a call at their main phone number. You can contact them. Do I have the phone number actually in front of me? I can put that in the chat as well. Let's see.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I'll put that phone number in right now. So you can give them a call and just request an assessment and they'll do the rest.
And I'm also wondering if perhaps the question could be related to whether or not they can contact you, even if they're not regional center clients?
For special education
Yes.
resources. So my office only represents and assists with clients of the regional center. However, you can contact Disability Rights California, and they have a youth group that can assist when it comes to IEP concerns. So I can put the direct phone number for Disability Rights California in the chat as well. And you can find the phone number also on the website, disabilityrightsca.org.
Thank you. Another question is that if a student has a classroom aid listed in the IEP, is there a timeline for how long they have to provide that support?
It is going to depend on the IEP. If the IEP states that a one-on-one aid is going to be there for a transition period of 1 to 2 months, then they have to be there for the entirety of that time. If there is not a specific timeline, then it can be interpreted that they are to have that for the rest of that school year for the entirety of that IEP. So if your IEP goes from September to September, then if there is not a timeline specific for that one-on-one aid saying that we're going to have an aid for the months of October and November and then no more aid, then you can assume that that aid is going to be available from September to September.
Thank you. 2 more quick questions. You mentioned that if you were bringing in an attorney or a tape recorder, you needed to notify the school at least 24 hours in advance. If a school is bringing in an attorney, how much notice must they provide to the family?
So prior to an IEP, when they are providing notices ahead of time, they will also state in those notices who is going to be in attendance, and they have to detail in there that their attorney is going to be in attendance. So I've seen that parents normally get that notice of IEP and who's going to attend and who is not going to be able to make it in order to give your consent to say, okay, you're okay with moving forward with the meeting without this person. They usually do it the day before.
Thank you. And the final question, and I know we've run a little bit over, but I noticed that no one's dropped off the call yet, is that we should have mentioned at the very beginning of this that the IEP structure and this discussion that we've had today is limited to the K-12 system because the laws that govern K-12 are under the IDEA, the Individuals with Disability Education Act, whereas things regarding college are governed underneath the American Disabilities Act or ADA. But the question that was asked specifically is there a difference between having a 504 or IEP when transitioning to university?
So he's in the transition to university. He's normally an IEP is for K through 12 or through when you're doing what we call he's required learning. So a 504 plan typically does not move with a student to university. However, it could be if you let the university know ahead of time and you sign up for I guess it could be disability related services through that university. So it would be similar to if you moved to a new school, then you would have new programs and new assistance that could be provided through that university or through that new school. I would suggest for universities that you contact disability related services. They always have a department, and that's where you can request additional time for testing. You really don't need that full academic structure as you do for K through 12, because in college, if you want to take a break, you can get up and go take a break. If you want to not attend class that day, you can choose not to attend class that day. It's not as structured as K through 12, but you can use disability related services to get more assistance when it comes to testing and giving you additional time for these finals, midterms, that type of activity. And also assistance if they need one-on-one aids for medical concerns. The university can provide that.
Yeah, and just as an aside, I have to say from my experience with college in general, is as compared to K through 12, where curriculum can be adjusted in college, because American Disabilities Act focuses on access rather than an appropriate education, which is the basis of IDEA. They will not ever actually change the requirements as they will in K through 12. So that's an important distinction. And we actually have a very good video that's up on the My Institute's website about the difference between K through 12 and college accommodations. One last follow-up, which is in relation to the classroom aid that's listed in the timeline. The question that was a follow-up to that question is, what if they say they don't have staffing to provide the in-class aid?
So if they say that they do not have the staffing, but it is listed in their IEP, they have to hire somebody. If it is not listed in their IEP yet and they're denying it at the beginning of an IEP, saying they don't want to do in one-on-one aid because of lack of staffing, that is not a reasonable example or not a reasonable explanation on why a child cannot be provided one-on-one aid if it is needed. So there could be a combination of concerns, but staffing can never be an example of why a child cannot receive a one-on-one aid. If you are running into that, please contact our office or contact Disability Rights, and our office can provide you with the specific. There is an actual regulation and court case. I just had to send it to somebody. So if you have concerns, you can send it over to me and I can copy and paste to another school district that is claiming that lack of staffing is a reason to not provide FAPE.
The UC Davis Mind Institute was founded in 1998 with a promise to reduce and prevent the disabilities that can be associated with autism and other neurodevelopmental conditions. Every day, our clinicians and researchers make progress on that promise. Our groundbreaking research on autism, Fragile X syndrome, chromosome 22q11.2 deletion syndrome, ADHD, and other conditions associated with disability are helping affected individuals achieve their fullest potential. Please visit our website or our social media platforms to find out more about current studies, upcoming events, and how you can help make a difference.